Hello, I'm so excited to be with you today. My name is Elizabeth Moon. I'm a Director of Solutions Architecture here at AWS. We're here today to talk about one of the most important aspects of cloud adoption, your people, skills, culture change, and leadership. And in just a moment, I'm going to be introducing a good friend, Jeff Smith, COO of World Fuel Services. Our conversation today is going to focus on real experience guidance. Jeff has been through this multiple times before, and we're going to be talking about his best practice recommendations for how to inspire your teams throughout this changing environment, the culture impact that can enable success in this type of large-scale adoption. We'll talk a little bit about the role of leaders and how to set really inspiring goals for your team throughout this type of change. Finally, we'll also talk about how to build the type of cloud experience that's going to accelerate your journey right from the beginning. Let's get started. I'm excited to introduce Jeff Smith. Jeff is the EVP and COO of World Fuel Services, and he is an inspiring leader who believes that talent and culture are differentiators to great companies. Jeff has held executive leadership positions across a wide variety of industries, including companies like IBM, Suncor, Telstra, Honeywell, and Toyota. Jeff, thank you so much for your time here today with us. Let's jump right into our discussion. As we get started, can you tell us a little bit about your role with World Fuel Services and how World Fuel is using AWS today?
Sure, thanks, Elizabeth. First, I work for World Fuel Services. We're a $40 billion energy management company. We buy, sell, and manage the logistics for any type of energy, be it liquid fuels, renewables, around the world. My role, I'm the COO, so I have all the financial shared services. I have the IT. I have the product development for products that we build and sell to others. And my key role is actually digitizing the company, moving it from a processing company to a real digital marketplace that connects buyers, sellers together in the most efficient way. The role that AWS has here is a key role. It's the foundation player. It's the heart and soul of helping us transition to a digital company. One of the key principles we have, Elizabeth, is that we work with partners we aspire to be like, not necessarily like ourselves. So when I started, for content, we brought Box in, we brought Zoom in 2 years before it became, almost, a necessity. And then AWS is our core platform provider. Is one of our key goals. We're going to be a digital company running completely in the cloud. So AWS has a culture play. It's got a technology play. It's got a leadership and partner play with us. So it's at the heart of it.
That's awesome to hear, and I really appreciate those insights. I think one of the things that in our discussions has really come up a lot is that culture is so important, and really you've been able to set the foundation as a leader, I think, for this large-scale adoption across a very large organization in some pretty unique ways. Can you share with us a little bit about how you kind of initiated the journey at World Fuel Services with your leadership team?
Sure, I will, Elizabeth. And it's I have been at this for about 20 years, trying to figure out how to operationalize culture, making it something you can learn, you can measure, you can practice, you can get better at it. But when I came in, I think for any senior leader, their core role in life is to create clarity of purpose for their teams. Create a productive work environment, and inspire them to do great things. So when I came in, I took all 55 executives from around the world, and we co-located together for a week in Miami, and we said we're gonna together develop what our big hills are, and they have to be really clear, really simple, so that anyone from the bottom to the top knows what they are. And those 4 hills for us was an agile culture, which we said it's got to have clarity of purpose. Its clarity is more important than certainty. Course correction more important than perfection. Self-directed teams over command and control. Talent and leadership was going to be our strategic advantage. It's really the only unique thing any company has. Anything else can be copied. We are going to have everything digitized, and we defined it, saying any data that comes in, whether it's unstructured or structured, it's going to come in digitally. We're going to capture it digitally. We're going to process it digitally. We're going to analyze it digitally, and that everything would be in the cloud. Where there's no hybrid here, only in the transition state, but we're gonna shut down everything. And I used all 55 leaders to say, how do we need to organize to do this? And we used essentially a Spotify, adopted Spotify model, but from the bottom up. We said, let's look at the work, not the leaders at the top. The important thing is look at the work. And we grouped work into squads, and then we took squads and we grouped those into tribes, and then we took tribes, we grouped that into domains. And the net of it is by using all 55 of the execs, by the time we came out, we said, well, today we have 10 layers, we have 55 execs, we really only need 4 layers, and we need about 25 execs. But everyone participated in that. So we all collectively figured out, and collective wisdom always outweighs the individual insights. We did that. I told everyone at the top, I said, I'll interview all 55 of you. We'll run a net promoter score. HR will interview you. We'll do our assessments, and we'll make the selections, and we'll pare this down and open the structure up very quickly. So from front to back, that entire process from setting our goals, our OKRs for key results and objectives, for doing the design work, for doing the selection, and actually the exit of the people, which is a hard thing to do, but you have to do it if you want to be a competitive company. That process front to back took a month. So I think that's the other lesson here is, that time, the industry is not waiting on anyone today, and we need to move quickly. And we used that process. And even today, as an example, we still measure our leaders every quarter on our 6 key criteria that we think are important for leaders at any level, and a net promoter score. And we want that feedback to get to leaders because their job is to create a great work environment for their own teams. So we're very disciplined about that.
Mm-hmm. I think there's so much in what you just talked about. There's a lot of key points in there. I want to start maybe by double clicking on one of them. You really sort of got everyone together, built that alignment with the leadership team on that vision. And I know in talking with you, you also believe in setting some pretty aggressive goals that your team will be inspired to really surprise themselves, right? I'd love to, if you could share some of that with us. That to me is really inspiring how you've done that.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing that I've learned from living around the world and also working around the world too, that language matters. And that, we constantly understate our capability to learn new things and do things at a greater clip. So we wanted to really set aspirational goals that anyone, whether they were the lowest level, entry level grad to a senior exec, would understand, and that they had to be really aspirational. So one of our aspirational goals in the cloud was to close all 22 data centers. Now that's unambiguous. Everyone can understand that. And we didn't know how to do it. And in fact, at the time we said it, we didn't know we had 22. We thought we had 18. But we
Wow.
said, we said, let's focus on the outcome and not how to get there. Let's let our teams, figure out how to get there. And we said we want to do that in 2 years. And we want to do it with no increase in OpEx, because I was trying to hit all the barriers that typically slow transitions down. And one of them is most people that have done digital transformations have a big hockey stick investment in capital and OpEx. And I said, we're going to have to find ways to fund this through other means, having a higher concentration of talent at the lower levels than at the higher levels, that we can fund getting more work done that way. We can fund things by changing, to an SD-WAN from traditional telco partners. We really put those constraints on us, and I think the constraints led to some real innovation.
That is super interesting to me as well. We have this at Amazon, as I know you're familiar, we have these leadership principles, and one of them is frugality that often gets sort of overlooked, but it really does. When you're focused on being frugal, you can really invent, new things and surprise yourself. So I love that. I think that's super helpful. One of the other things I'd like to, really understand, you talked a lot about kind of setting the organization up to enable the teams to be able to really execute as well as possible. And I know you're a big believer in Agile. Can you talk a little bit more about the model that you set up and how that organizational structure and style really supported the journey to cloud that you were looking for?
Yeah, there's 2 kind of key problems to solve. One is, you want to be able to very efficiently distribute work to teams that maximize their throughput. In setting up these teams, we had certain constraints. We had, some of the Amazons, two pizza teams, they should be no bigger than two pizzas can feed. But I think more than anything, the realization that labor is really the only dimension where economies of scale generally don't work. Everything else, you produce more products, your unit cost goes down, quality metrics generally go up. But people, the more people you add, you generally start adding overhead. And that's what slows things down. So if you want to do a digital transformation, you need to make sure that your talent density is really high in the work, because then they're ones connecting the dots and not the leaders. And then your leadership structure can be a lot thinner. I think I had mentioned before we had 10 layers of leaders. And when we did the design work, we said it's going to be 4. But the problem is that only works if you build the talent density up to do that. Things we want to do is create maturity assessments so we can give great feedback to the leaders on what's working and what's not. And the same thing with our squads, to give them signals as to what's working and what's not. So every quarter we do leadership assessments for all leaders, top to bottom, from myself down to a first line leader. And that's to give them signals to help them. And we do an agile maturity assessment, DevOps maturity assessment on all the squads. So that they see where they can get better. And the idea behind that is that teams, if you're evaluated on 10, 15 characteristics, and you see some are green, some are red, what teams generally will do, go, well, who else is green where we're red? And they go and copy that from them. And that was the absolute intent, was to really drive this learning culture, to look outside a team's own boundaries, to say, hey, someone else has solved this. We can get better at a faster pace if we have passionate curiosity and are willing to learn from others. So I think the thing we came up with, this concept of operationalizing culture, making sure it was something that you could learn, that you could practice, that you could measure and get better at. And in general, we have about 20 agile practices. We have about 6 different leadership practices. There are things you can learn, you can practice it, you can get better, and we measure to give the signals. And I think we really honed in on, if you give people the right signals and you get them in their wheelhouse, something that they can do really well, then they will get better at a much faster pace. And in our case, because we had such a constrained timeline to do this, we knew that we had to break this barrier where you generally add a lot more overhead. When you have problems, what happens? The first thing you do is hire a manager. We're like, well, we just can't do that. We've got to build the talent density up to do that, so that we can operate on a much leaner model, which meant there's no compression algorithm for experience, as Andy's saying, but we replaced about 1/3 of our workforce, to be honest. We started a huge grad program underneath that at the low level. We had lateral hires come in. And I think the lesson here is the tactics that you want to deploy have to match the talent that you have. So if you want to play in the cloud, you have to have the talent to do that. You've got to take it seriously, make it something that you can accelerate. And that's what we went through really with our Agile program, breaking into small squads so we could multi-process a problem. The key critical thinking skill we had to get better at is taking big problems, breaking them into small problems, and distributing those small problems concurrently to multiple teams, and that way we could accelerate the transition.
That is really interesting, and I love hearing how the talent strategy is also really folding right in to enable the rest of this, journey and this transformation. Can we double click a little bit on, you mentioned that you've brought a lot of new folks into the organization. Have you also been working on a training? I think we've talked about some training programs that have been in place as well for some of the existing folks. Maybe tell us a little bit about how you balance those. I know this is a question a lot of leaders are asking themselves.
Yeah, I think the one thing key is being honest with people and giving everybody a fair go to get in their wheelhouse. We found a lot of people that were just in the wrong role. Some of our most outstanding people today that have made progress at a faster pace than anyone are our current employees. But you also realize there's a lot of people that were used to working a certain way, and you just don't have the time to do that. So we set very specific objectives, and we had different training programs. So in fact, Amazon helped us out. We did evening courses in the cloud, and we said, listen, we're going to give you all the opportunity to get trained, but you're going to have to put some of your own time into it as well. It's also setting the expectation with employees that the career is theirs. It's not anyone else's to manage, it's their own. And we had, training programs that we came in. We also, made sure that we grouped and formed our squads, effectively. Any great sports coach will tell you they spend 70% of their time forming the right squad with the right chemistry so people learn from each other. Most IT shops don't do that. You put projects together, on a whim, and you don't think about the chemistry, because your greatest learning is getting around other great people with a big, hairy problem to solve. So I think the formation of the squads was important, bringing our grads in and having a program to get them up to speed quickly. Using our partners to help us in recruiting. I mean, Amazon, you all went to universities with us and talked about our culture and how it matched yours. And we did AI robotics exercises at unis, and it helped us bring the right people in. And I think the reality is, if you care about talent, you will look at every open avenue to train people, bring them up to speed, put them in the right roles, and at the same time ingest new people like any great sports team would, so that the rising tide lifts all ships. And I think that's what we got, a real acceleration in talent development by setting targets that were high. We said we want everyone, and we're talking financial people as well, to be certified an AWS cloud practitioner or a robotics practitioner. And all of a sudden, we made it very clear that it was important that you take your craft seriously. We want people that love their craft, that care about it, that'll tell us when they're struggling, that want to move to something else, or if they want to move on to another opportunity outside the company, that's fine as well. But it's training programs, it's formation of teams, it's great assignments, it's having enough congestion of talent that you can learn from others as well, and that's probably the biggest enabler.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we see a lot of that as well. One of the things that I'd love to understand, I know you're a big advocate of diversity and inclusion in the company. Can you talk to me a little bit about, because I'm hearing lots of different talent programs. There's probably a place in some of these programs as well to be really looking out for the diverse talent, and maybe you could share how that's helped you, drive the kind of organization that you're looking for and the kind of solutions you're looking to provide.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, this is one that's kind of near and dear to my heart. But I think that a lot of people think that the biggest constraint of doing any major transformation is time and money. Well, it's not. It's not the constraint of time or money. It's the constraint of thought. So how do you get diversity of thought? Well, diversity of thought happens in a number of different parameters. It's in gender, it's in race, it's in economic background, it's in cultural background where people come from, and understanding that and recognizing that mixing that all together gives you phenomenal outcomes. And I've got a saying that talent is equally distributed around the world, but opportunity isn't. And it's our job as leaders. It is not a passive exercise. You have to be directly involved in changing the opportunity equation. And I'll give you a couple examples, and one's from a long time ago. It's 2011 in Suncorp, and I was in a taxi going to the airport, and I read a story about a young man from Burundi. And he had spent 12 years in a civil war, 5 years in Kenya, in refugee camp. He learned English on his own. He got sponsored to get into Australia, and he just finished a degree at Griffith University. And he's 32 years old by that time. Left his wife in Burundi, couldn't even make it over. But he was so thankful for the opportunity to get that education. But no one would hire him because he was 32 and still kind of early on in his English proficiency. And I read that newspaper, and it was very easy to sit there and say, well, this guy's had an opportunity, and just let it go. But at that time, I thought, no, that's not right. He's got the talent, but he hasn't had the opportunity because of his circumstances. So I called the university. I had my HR people get involved. We got a hold of him, and I ran shared services at Suncorp. And so we hired this young man, and he's now the manager of vendor management at Suncorp after 8 years, and had his wife come over, 3 young kids. But it taught me an important lesson that you have to step in big. It's not something you can sit back and say, some HR run a program on diversity and inclusion. The leaders have to lead with this. And when I went to IBM, I started P-Tech, which is around the U.S. Now, with a school in Brooklyn to sponsor kids to get a high school education as well as a vocational degree. And in World Fuel in Miami, we're a huge sponsor of Europe for disadvantaged kids working with community colleges, and I'm proud to say we won the Partner of the Year award with Europe. So I think the message around diversity and inclusion, you have to first recognize it's a lot of different dimensions. The more you have, the better, and that leaders have to step in. This is not something to hand off to someone else to say, it's good enough that we're trying and we're being fair. It's not good enough. You have to really be active in it.
Mm-hmm. I like this idea of sort of creating that, you take the bold vision sort of everywhere you go, and leaning into diversity and inclusion is another area I'm hearing here that's important. It allows you so you don't overlook the critical talent you need, right, with the organization, and folks, have different points of view and perspectives they're adding up to creating that, that overall team dynamic that you're looking for.
Elizabeth, we have something we call a team resume. It's kind of like speed dating, and the teams put together a team resume of what they do, but also their backgrounds, and they have like 2 to 3 minutes to present this, and then the next team comes in, and it is amazing the sheer difference in backgrounds. We've had people that were NFL football players, people that had done all sorts of different activities, and the appreciation of people's background is so important, not only in what their capabilities are, but also where their interests are, and making sure we put people in their power zone. I think that's something we don't do a good enough job as leaders historically, as we see someone through our own lens and say that's what they should do, that's what they should develop. And I've been told that a number of times too. This is your weakness, you should work on that. And I'm like, what? So I can be marvelously mediocre? I'd rather hone in on the stuff I'm really good at and compensate stuff I'm not with people that have a passion for that. So I think the diversity is just the single biggest contributor, to creating a great chemistry and having accelerated learning.
Awesome. One of the things that I know I'd love to hear your perspective on, you mentioned a little bit about quite a bit actually, operationalizing culture. That's something you believe, we can do it, you can learn it, you can create the one rather than just sort of let it happen. And you mentioned a little bit about some leadership guiding thoughts that you have, or principle. We call them leadership principles at Amazon. But I'm wondering if you could share a little bit more on how you've been able to sort of create that structure from some guiding principles that you might have.
Sure. I think operationalizing culture is turning principles into practices that you can learn. And so in an agile sense, we came up with 20 practices that kind of cover, anything from release management to continuous integration, continuous delivery. Those are examples of practices that you can break a culture down into multiple practices that it takes to learn to do the kind of work that you want. On the leadership side, we came up with 6 practices that we were going to measure people on, and it was forming teams was number 1. And the reason that was number 1 was we thought every evidence I was having was that from coaches and external people is like, you don't spend enough time on the chemistry of the team. The forming productive teams is the number 1 job a leader has. So that was 1. Distributing work, making sure we get it to the squads at the right pace, at the right time to maximize their productivity, and measuring what matters. And so we use OKRs to make sure that people know what results we want to get. It's what gets done that really matters. And those are 3 kind of what I would call objective dimensions. And then there's 3 behavioral, which we think are probably the most important, which are what leaders attract, develop, and retain people. And those are easy to measure. You can look at transitions in and out of your squads. And so it's really important. You want people to be attractors and not detractors. And then the second behavioral one is around listening and learning from others. And the wider that span is, the better. So if we find people that are learning outside their squad, that's great. But if they're learning outside the company and listening and learning from others, that's even better. And then influence and impact is the 6th one. So, is your influence and impact as a leader greater than the people you manage, or is it just your squad? The people that have an influence outside of the areas they're directly accountable for are the ones you really want to nurture. And then the 7th characteristic is Net Promoter Score. So we take those 6 characteristics, we measure every leader top down along with an NPS every quarter. And what we see is we get the signals back to people. They either step up, and majority do, and they get better. They ask for help if they're struggling, or we have to make tough decisions on the ones that don't.
Mm-hmm. So this measuring everything or measuring what matters, I think, is the way you phrase it. I think is so critical, and not. It sounds like you're creating a number of measurements beyond just sort of the end goal. You've set that really aggressive big goal, but you're also measuring along the way, a lot of the little incremental steps or incremental inputs maybe that are going to help you get to that output goal. That's something we also do at Amazon. Is that
Yeah,
right?
I think the key learning for me, just been at this for a while, is we've always been good as leaders of measuring the people doing the work. We've got all sorts of productivity,
Mm-hmm.
throughput, velocity, cycle time and WIP, cycle time in the backlog. We measure the heck out of the people doing the work. We've been horrible at measuring the leaders' dimensions to help facilitate, leading that piece. And I think that's what we went after. I probably should have done it 10 years ago, to be honest. We're always worried about who's doing the work, but the reality is, if you're going to operate with a leaner model with less leaders and a highly high congestion of talent doing the work, those leaders have to be really good, and we got to measure them to make sure that they see the signals coming. And I think that's our we use the term operationalizing culture, that it's something we can measure those dimensions. And we do it on a regular basis. Anything you do once a year, you do poorly. So, doing it once a quarter is probably not quite enough. We're talking about, should we do it even more frequently? But I think what's happened is we've gotten better at an accelerated pace. And that's the real key. I think you mentioned before, we set a goal of closing down 22 data centers in 2 years. We closed down 20, and that's also including COVID. But we kept our OpEx flat. And the way we were able to do that is have a lot more people doing the work as opposed to a lot more people leading the work, and using the savings there to figure out better ways of solving the problem, and ultimately, just getting a lot better results.
That's amazing. So 20 data centers in just 2 years. That is pretty amazing progress. Jeff, I think we're just about out of our time today. I want to really thank you for joining us. Would you like to share any final thoughts with the leaders that might be listening in, wondering how to get started as we close here?
Yeah, I'd probably just say, we way understate, our capabilities for doing big things. So I think thinking big is really critical. And, big breakthroughs happen when something that's suddenly possible meets what's desperately needed. And companies today are desperately needed is a digital transformation. So, and the possibilities are there. I mean, AWS is a phenomenal company. We picked AWS not because of the products. We didn't evaluate the products, and so we evaluated the company, because my view is you are the company you keep. And that's why we think, with, our partner strategy is really critical. So, there's back yourself to do something good. People are going to follow you, and aim for success, not perfection, because if you don't, you just lose the opportunity to learn new things in life.
Awesome. Well, these are really amazing tips, great real world guidance, and we really appreciate you joining us today, Jeff. Thank you so much.
No, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it.
As we wrap up, I want to call out some of the key learnings for our audience here today. As Jeff highlighted, one of the most important things you can do as a leader is really start with a shared vision. I loved Jeff's story about how he gathered his leaders together and really got that top-down alignment that can be so critical to kick off that cloud journey. As well, Jeff talked about taking on big goals. One of the exciting things that World Fuel Services has been able to do is shut down 20 data centers in just 2 years. They surprised even themselves by taking on this big goal. Organizing your teams for success is another potential accelerant for the cloud. And Jeff talked about using small agile squads that help the team focus and really try and get the velocity for the development that they were looking for. As well, you're going to want to focus on enabling your team. And this can be done both by bringing in some of that cloud expertise through new folks, new talent into the organization, as well as looking at creating a broad training plan that goes across your organization. We heard Jeff talk about even folks from different parts of the organization are taking AWS training at World Fuel Services. I love hearing that. And the final tip that he shared was around measuring results. And we want to look at not just that end result or the output goal, but really measuring a lot of the input metrics along the way that can tell us that we're headed in that right direction. One of the cool things for me was hearing Jeff talk about the power of leadership and the really critical role that our leaders play in the journey to the cloud. And so one of the things he talked about measuring was leaders scores, how folks are feeling in the team, what the team is doing together. All of these things together really leave us with a crisp way to start, build momentum, and really execute that cloud journey in the right way. So I want to thank everybody for attending today. If you're interested in learning more about how to migrate to AWS at scale, I encourage you to take a look at some of the links on this resources page. We've recently published a bunch of workshops that will help your team get some hands-on experience right from the start. As I mentioned, thank you so much for joining us today. We've really enjoyed sharing these tips with you. And please take a moment to fill out the survey for us. Thanks again. Bye-bye.